Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the final webinar today covering the Agri-Tech Catalyst Round 10. So this is the food systems and nutrition one. Just as you know, you are on the YouTube channel. Any questions you have, pop them in the chat box and we'll deal with them as we see fit and proceed that way. And obviously, as you'd like to be able to read there, this is being recorded. Okay, so we said it's round 10. We are focusing on the food systems and nutrition in this, and it should take us probably nearer an hour than the hour and a half, but we'll run you through things as we go. So my name's Simon Beatty. I'm from the Knowledge Transfer Network. I'm taking you through today and chairing the event. Once I've finished the introductions, I'm going to hand over to Catherine Miller from Innovate UK, who will take you through the scope and some of the application process for this competition. Delighted to have Sandra Hill along with us to talk about her case study in this area, which hopefully will give you some experience on what these projects can look like. She can share with you some of the highs and the lows, and hopefully more highs than lows. We'll then go to the question and answer section. So again, that's use that chat box within the YouTube facility, and then we'll tell you on the ways that we've got to try and help you build some consortia to hopefully bid into round 10. So KTN, Knowledge Transfer Network. We are the UK's innovation network. We are very pleased to be able to do the role that we do. And we are all about trying to bring together the best people to get the best projects, which ultimately help Catherine in her competitions, etc., to have these business-led innovations that make a difference to UK PLC, and obviously within the Catalyst competition, it has that wider reach within Africa. So we really are here to try and help you and do things in that way. Obviously, this is one of the competitions we're working on. There are other competitions available through Innovate UK and other funding initiatives around the Agri-Tech area, agri-food area. So the best way of finding out about that is sign up to the newsletter, and you'll see that there is that link there, and one of my colleagues in the background will also be putting that in the chat so you can see that yourselves. So as I said, I'm Simon Beatty from the Knowledge Transfer Network. Those colleagues that I just briefly touched on is Lucy Mather, who specialises in the livestock area, Pedro Carvalho, who works in the crop area. And of course, Catherine, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be with us all today and talk us through that and answer some of your questions if you have any around scope, eligibility, etc. So what are we trying to do today? As I said before, KTN, we're here to try and help you get your project visit probably as good as it can be. You know, understand what the competition is all about, so that hopefully you only really put some effort into it if it's something that is really applicable to the competition and has a really good chance of succeeding. You know, we're not here to try and just nod and say yes to it. We're here to try and give you a critical opinion at the start, and we can be quite honest and blunt about that. So we don't really want people to waste their time when they're completely out of scope, etc. We are trying to do that and make it as good as possible, because ultimately we want the best projects possible to be funded. So today you're going to learn those lessons from Sandra about how to get a successful project, what it's like to be in a project, what's gone well, what could do better, and perhaps any pitfalls, etc. We're also going to give you those opportunities I mentioned before to try and meet new partners, new people, and form some new collaborations, which hopefully be successful projects. So really, we are here to help you be successful. Okay, so we do want you to participate today. As I said before, the chat box in YouTube is there for you to put your questions in, and we will answer those as best as we can. And in some cases, there may be a question there that you want to be slightly more private. You can either contact people within the KTN ourselves, and we'll do what I do. But ideally, the best way is to use that support@Innovate email address that's on the screen now, and will also appear in the chat box. Okay, so as we say, a lot of this is about meeting new people and giving those introductions. So we have set up the Meeting Mojo account, which was sent with your joining instructions. We know a number of people have already done that, and the last time I looked, We had well over 60 people registered that are interested in there. So there we say who they are, what they're interested in, what they'd like to find out. Give you the opportunity to log into that, find that information. And what you can do then is you can send direct messages to each other just to explore that. And there's also facilities on there to have a one-to-one video chat. And we'll go into some more detail about that later. Also, you'll have found in your joining instructions, we sent a capability document where we've captured all the information that you gave us when you registered. And hopefully we left that in an Excel format so you can search it and you can be able to find people. Once you found those people, hopefully they are on the Meeting Mojo and you can go forward and make those contacts. If for some reason that doesn't work for you, of course, please contact us at the KTN and we'll do some further looking for that. We are trying to focus on the Meeting Mojo as a mechanism to do it because of that one-to-one thing that you can actually get that personal relationship and start working out whether somebody you want to work with or not. But the approach we had before was a LinkedIn group. So this LinkedIn group's been around since the round 8 through round 9 and now into round 10. So that's there again as another way of doing it. So it really is what works best for you. But we'd like to think that the Mojo might be slightly better. But again, my colleagues will put that into the chat box so you have that link. That's it really.
Hello and welcome to this webinar on the Agri-Tech Catalyst Round 10. I'm Catherine Miller and I'm Innovation Lead for Food and Nutrition at Innovate UK. First of all, I'm going to give a very quick introduction to Innovate UK. Innovate UK is part of UK Research and Innovation, or UKRI, which aims to be a research and innovation system fit for the future. It brings together 7 research councils, Innovate UK and Research England, and together with government, we invest over £7 billion a year in research and innovation by partnering with academia and industry to fund the best research there is. As part of UK Research and Innovation, Innovate UK drives productivity and economic growth by supporting businesses to develop and realise the potential of new ideas, including those from the UK's world-class research base. We support businesses to realise the potential of new technologies, develop ideas and make them a commercial success. I'm going to give a brief background to the Agri-Tech Catalyst and then cover the competition scope. So the UK government's Agri-Tech strategy was launched in 2013 with the aim of improving translation of research into practical application for agriculture and related industries in the UK and overseas. There was an investment of £160 million which funded 4 Agri-Tech centres for innovation and also the Agri-Tech Catalyst for translational research. This also included funding from the Department for International Development to fund projects relevant to international development outcomes. The Department for International Development has funded the Agri-Tech Catalyst since 2013 and across 9 competition rounds, funding projects for UK organisations to work with organisations in developing countries. Since round 7, the focus has been on Africa. 58 projects have been funded so far, 53 of those within Africa. And this has delivered over £20 million of grant funding across 13 African countries. Round 9 projects haven't been announced yet, but will fund a further 14 projects in Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, Niger, Nigeria, Rwanda, South Africa, Tanzania and Uganda, and will provide an additional £6 million worth of funding. We now have funding through the Global Challenges Research Fund, or GCRF, to fund further rounds, including this one, round 10. We have funded a range of projects across previous Catalyst rounds. Projects within the food systems and nutrition theme include a project looking at developing packaging for fruit and vegetables from maize stover waste in Uganda, and a project to develop high-protein snacks from insects in Nigeria, and you'll hear more about this project later on. So as I mentioned, the Department for International Development has funded the Agri-Tech Catalyst across the previous 9 rounds, and we now have further funding from the Global Challenges Research Fund to fund future rounds. This competition is round 10, and we also aim to open a competition focusing on later stage projects next year. These are the key dates for Agri-Tech Catalyst round 10. So the competition opens on the 20th of July. We have our online theme-specific brokerage events today, and then we also have an online competition briefing on the 28th of July. And this competition briefing is run by our competitions team and will go into detail around the application process and also into the project finance details. The submission deadline is 11 AM on the 21st of October. It's important just to note that quite often competition deadlines are noon on Innovate UK competitions, but these are now 11 AM, so please make sure that you submit by 11, otherwise it will not be assessed. You'll find out whether your application has been successful on the 18th of December, and projects are due to start by April 2021. The scope of the Agri-Tech Catalyst is broad. Projects must show the potential to deliver impact in Africa through the uptake of agricultural and food systems technologies and innovation. The scope of the catalyst includes primary crop and livestock production, including aquaculture, non-food uses of crops except for ornamentals, challenges in downstream food processing, distribution, storage and value addition, improving availability and accessibility of safe, healthy and nutritious foods, and projects must be sustainable in the context of environmental challenges and also minimise negative effects such as pollution, food losses and waste. The following are example areas within the food systems and nutrition theme. You could focus on one of these areas, but please note this list is not exhaustive. So you could look at projects to add value through food processing, also projects looking at improving productivity and quality of foods, and projects addressing food safety issues throughout the value chain. Funding for this competition comes from the Global Challenges Research Fund and forms part of the UK ODA, or Official Development Assistance Commitment. ODA is defined as flows to countries and territories on the DAC list of ODA recipients. Only research directly and primarily relevant to the problems of developing countries may be counted as ODA. So applications for this competition must clearly demonstrate that the work they propose will benefit agriculture and food systems in Africa and how they will deliver this benefit. During the lifetime of a project, it may not impact large numbers of people, but proposals must show how the project will build a pathway to future development impact. There can be benefits to the UK, so in terms of company benefits and benefits to the researchers involved in the project, but this benefit must be secondary in nature. The primary benefit has to be in the developing country that you're working with. And activities can take place in the UK, but they must clearly be for challenges in Africa and not for the UK market. I'm briefly going to cover now the eligibility criteria for the competition. So these are the key points for the eligibility criteria. So projects must be collaborative, they must include a business and as a minimum, and they must include an organisation from the UK and from one of the eligible African countries that I'll show you shortly. Projects work as a hub and spoke model, so you must have a UK-based administrative lead or project lead who manages the finances and claims funds on behalf of all the other partners. There are three strands: early stage feasibility studies, mid-stage industrial research and late-stage experimental development. Early stage feasibility studies must have a UK-based lead applicant, and they can be led by an academic or a business-based partner. Projects in the early stage feasibility strand can be from 100,000 to 500,000 and 12 to 18 months long. Mid-stage industrial research projects must be industry-led, so they must have an industry lead, and they can be projects from 250,000 up to £1 million and last up to 3 years. And finally, late-stage experimental development projects again must be collaborative, but these are business-to-business partnerships, so research organisations can only participate as subcontractors. These projects can be 150,000 to 800,000 pounds and last up to 18 months. And as I mentioned previously, projects need to start by the 1st of April 2021. This slide shows you the eligible countries in Africa. So the following countries are eligible for funding. If you are an organisation outside of these eligible countries, you can still participate in a project, but you need to make sure that as a minimum you meet the eligibility criteria, which includes a UK-based partner and a partner from one of these eligible countries. The amount of grant that you can claim depends on the size of your business and also the stage of research that your project is at. For early stage feasibility studies and industrial research awards, you can claim up to 70% of eligible project costs if you're a micro or small business, 60% if you're a medium-sized business, and 50% if you're a large business. For experimental development projects which are nearer to market, you can claim up to 45% of eligible project costs if you're a micro or small business, 35% for medium-sized businesses, and then 25% for large businesses. And grant rates are the same for UK and African-based businesses. This slide shows the research partner participation rules. So for early stage and mid-stage projects, the total cost for your research partners must not exceed 50% of the total project costs. If your consortium contains more than one research organisation, this 50% will be shared between them. For late-stage experimental development projects, research-based partners cannot claim funding but can participate as subcontractors. UK universities can claim 100%, so that's 80% of full economic costs. African universities can claim 100% of project costs. Other research organisations, for example, research and technology organisations, as well as public sector organisations and charities, can also claim 100% of project costs. I'm going to very briefly cover the application process for those of you who haven't applied for funding through Innovate UK before. To apply for funding through this competition, you need to go to the Innovation Funding Service, or IFS, which is an online portal to apply for funding. You need to search for the competition you're going to apply to and then click on the How to Apply tab. Here you'll find lots of information about the project questions and the application process. If you don't already have an account on IFS, you need to create an account for your organisation. The first part of the application is on your project details, so this section is not scored. First of all, you'll be asked for a short summary and objective of the project, including what is innovative about it. Then you'll be asked to fill in your public description. So this is a description of your project which will be published if you're successful, so make sure there's nothing that's commercially sensitive within this public description section. Then you'll be asked for the scope. So how does your project align with the scope of this competition? And if your project's not in scope, it won't be sent for assessment. You'll be then asked two further questions. Firstly, equality, diversity and inclusion. So there is a short survey just to collect data on applicants, but this isn't scored. And question 2 on the consortium. So again, this isn't scored, this is just providing a list of all organisations, contact details and addresses and the type of organisations in your consortium. There are 11 main questions in the application. So the first question is around the business opportunity. So outline the business opportunity and what the project team needs to do to successfully address it within the time frame of the project. Question 4 is on the market opportunity. So what is the size of the market opportunity that this project might open up? Question 5 is on the project results. So how will the project's results be exploited and disseminated? And you need to describe the potential exploitable outputs of the project, such as new products or services, new processes or applications. Question 6 covers official development assistance. So why is the project eligible for ODA funding? Clearly explain how your project fits within the scope for ODA. You also must include a basic logic model with this question as an appendix. Question 7 looks at how your project is compliant with the International Development Gender Equality Act. Question 8 looks at the technical approach. So what technical approach will be adopted and how will the project be managed? You need to include the main objectives of the work that you're going to carry out and also submit a project plan as an appendix. Question 9 covers innovation, so explain what is innovative about the project. Question 10 is looking at risk. So what are the risks, whether that's technical, commercial, environmental, to project success? And what is the project's risk management strategy? You can submit a risk register as an appendix for this question. Question 11 is on project team. So do the project team have the right skills, experience and access to facilities to deliver the identified benefits in the project? So you need to describe the track record of the project team and explain why they're the best people to be involved in your project. You must submit a draft collaboration agreement as an appendix to this question. Question 12 looks at financial commitment. So what is the financial commitment required for the project? So you need to explain the project costs you've listed in the finances section of your application. And finally, question 13, added value. How does the financial support from this funding add value to the project and the collaborators? And what impact will the injection of public funding have on the partners involved? So here are the links to the 3 strands of the competition: early stage, mid stage and late stage. Make sure that you go to the correct link depending on the stage of research that you're applying for. We have a customer support services line, and the phone number's there on the screen, and also an email address. So please do get in touch if you're not sure if your project meets the scope of the competition. We can provide advice around that. Also, you can contact the Knowledge Transfer Network in terms of your application. So you can ask to speak to the KTN to look at how you filled in the application, and they can provide some advice and guidance on that. And the Innovate UK website link is just on there as well. Thank you very much, and I'll hand over to the KTN to continue the webinar.
Great, thank you very much for that, Catherine. Hopefully that's very clear about the scope and the process for everybody there. But if you do have those questions, do please remember there's the chat box that you can pop that into the YouTube. And when we come to the question section, we'll try and answer as many of those as possible for you. So now the chance to hand over to Sandra Hill, the Managing Director of Biopolymer Solutions, and she's going to talk us through her experiences to date so far with this competition. Sandra.
Good morning. My name is Sandra Hill, and it is my pleasure today to introduce you to our Agri-Tech programme, which has been supported by Innovate and DFID. The consortium for the project consists of small businesses and academic institutions, one of which is based in rural Nigeria. Let me start by addressing the question of why we are so passionate about this programme. I am sure I do not have to explain to anyone that the future can look bleak in regards to the creation of enough high-quality foods for our growing populations, and that protein may well be the critical factor in keeping the world fed. So what can a couple of tiny companies do to help? Well, what these SMEs do have are several lifetimes expertise working with food processing. They also have developed a specific product which they feel is unique in that it can be made from a range of starchy materials and can incorporate high, in fact very high levels of protein, and that this product is still good to eat and it's safe to eat even after long-term storage at ambient temperatures. The question is, what proteins should be used in such a product? The answer could be lots of protein, but there is a great push to utilise proteins from insects. Insect proteins are nutritionally sound. Growth of insects provides a low environmental footprint, but there's a barrier to their general acceptance as food for humans. This may be overcome by extracting and purifying the proteins, but then the costs, financial and environmental, are increased. Ideally, one should use the whole insects with minimal processing, as long as the resultant product is acceptable to the consumer and is safe to eat. So what we wanted to do is to use protein coming from whole insects with minimal processing rather than proteins which were extracted. So the goal of this current project was to create a product, and into that product to incorporate a high level of protein coming from insects. These insects needed to be sourced sustainably and preferably farmed in a small way within the rural community. The insects need to be processed to make them safe, but without creating difficult waste streams. Using these insects, we want to create a food product that is easy to store, can be eaten without further heating, and is actually very good to eat. So the SMEs had the IP and understanding for the product. We had an academic colleague that understood insect proteins, but we needed somewhere that could supply the ingredients and could benefit from such a product. So we approached the Federal Polytechnic of Oko in Nigeria. This was a very new venture for the UK group, as although we had plenty of international experience, we had never worked directly in Africa. We would not have attempted this without the encouragement and funding coming from the Innovate programme. So in November last year, we embarked on an 18-month feasibility study. The idea was to use locally African sourced starchy materials and insects and to process these together to form the food product. We felt that this food product had three major outlets. It could be created within and then sold within a local community. We thought it would be a useful product for those who are nutritionally challenged, for example, the urban poor or when disasters strike. And thirdly, it could be an expensive, high-protein snack designed for those who believe this would be nutritionally beneficial. We also had to ensure that it was sustainable and safe. I have already introduced some elements of the consortium, but it is the camaraderie within this group that has been essential to getting this project up and running and keeping it going. The two SMEs and University of Nottingham are situated closely together, but the Federal Polytechnic is much further away in Anbar Estate, marked by the star on the map. I think we made the right decision to go and visit FPO early in the work. This is Jo from the University of Nottingham. This is Mary Okpala, who is leading the whole of our Nigerian group, and that's me. I love the title above the FPO's food technology teaching block, proudly food scientists. That's what we should all aspire to. Only by sitting down and establishing some ground rules for the project and being there in Nigeria, in that locality, could we begin to understand the different challenges for the project. I have also added Innovate as our list of workers because we really needed their support at times. For every Innovate project, you need to have some work packages. And for us, these were relatively easy at the start. We needed to get the right materials. We needed to assess those materials. We needed to make a brilliant product. And then we needed to make sure it was commercially viable. And we need to manage the whole thing. We made a cracking start to the project. We met the people, we'd sorted out which starchy materials we were to use, and we defined what insects we needed. And then the lockdown started to happen. We made the strategic decision that we wanted to keep going. We had created momentum, and there was a lot that we could do. There's some things that become very apparent in those first 4 months of the project. We knew that we needed to go back and rethink about some things. And we established weekly calls with Nigeria and with each other in the UK. And we found that we needed to make sure those calls were very carefully structured, and we defined what each partner needed to be getting on with. And in fact, we did achieve a great deal. We really utilised our time to sort things out properly, to read and define and think. We started to engage with several aspects, but perhaps one of the crucial areas that has taken our time is worrying about our insect supply. Thanks to certain members of our team, I know a lot more about insects now than I did a few months ago. But I also learned that some of what one understands from the literature and from reports does not seem to be as informative as it should be. At the start, we believed we could source insects for this project relatively easily, but it has proved problematical. For obvious reasons, we needed a trackable insect resource, and we're struggling with this. We have to thank those at FPO who've sorted out our understanding about how palm weevils are farmed. These pictures were actually taken by Mary. The weevils are grown on dead trees, and the palm wine and the weevils create a joint source of income for the area. However, this was not quite the controlled environment for insect farming that we thought we could tap into. In addition to palm weevil, we had expected to include crickets and grasshoppers into our studies. We tried to find a farm source of these that we could use, but have not been successful. So we have decided to farm our own crickets. This was not an easy decision, and a lot of work has gone into establishing how this can be done and our objectives for such a venture. We were very lucky to be introduced to Dr. Honor, and he has helped us to get this farm going. The intention is that we will end up by having an excellent understanding of what actually needs to be done to create a small farm system for black crickets, and also to create enough of these so that we have plenty to add to our own products. So finally, I can report that the insect farm is being created. And we're also concentrating on many different details so that when we get back into the labs and manufacturing areas, we can make very rapid progress. Banishment to our homes has allowed us to take time out and really think about what we've been trying to achieve. It has highlighted a mantra for us. Is it safe? Is it sustainable? Is it sensible? The product we are going to achieve at the end of this project will be safe. It will be manufactured sustainably. Whether it's commercially viable, well, for that we're going to have to wait and see. But we do have 12 months of this feasibility study left. Thank you for listening.
Sandra, that was really very interesting description of your project, and the enthusiasm there to make it happen really came through for me. So we're now to the Q&A session. We've got some of those Q&As you've already put into the chat box for us. Just that reminder then there for you, if you have got any questions, both for Sandra or for Catherine about the process, pop them in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them, and we'll try and share all the questions from the webinar today and the earlier ones today as almost like a frequently answered questions. So I'm going to start off with the first question for Catherine. If you've got a project that cuts across two areas, say perhaps crop and food and nutrition, what do you do with that? How do you handle that?
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, so we've had a couple of questions around this. You can absolutely have a project that crosses various different areas. The main reason we've split the webinars today into 3 different themes is so that they are very broad themes, livestock, crop, and then food systems and nutrition. And the reason for that really was to make sure that the right audience was watching the presentations. We had a relevant case study, and also it gives you the opportunity to network with people who are interested in a similar theme. But absolutely, you can look at a project that's looking at nutrition in animal feed, for example. Where does that fit? Is it nutrition or is it livestock? It doesn't matter. You can have projects that cross the different sectors.
Catherine, I think there was a little bit more around that one of the questions, sort of just describing milk. Is that a livestock or is that a food system and nutrition? I guess it's just down to the absolute detail of that, is it?
Again, I mean, the scope is broad. You don't have to say, my project is specifically in livestock or nutrition. You can have a project that crosses multiple sectors. So it's absolutely fine to look at a project in the multiple areas.
Excellent, thank you. It's a question from myself actually to Sandra. In your presentation, you were talking about how you went from, was it the palm weevil and now into farming crickets. How easy was that from a project point of view to change what you were doing from the process?
Well, I think one of the interesting parts about the product, the very specific product that we're making, is that we seem to be able to put in quite high protein materials into it without destroying the texture. So we're hoping that we're getting away with using a range of different insects. And the palm weevil, of course, is very different because it comes in with a very high oil content. And normally, if you mix that in with a starchy type material, you would destroy the expansion. So I think part of the novelty, the innovation of the materials that we're making is that we can include insect or other type materials into it and not destroy the texture. So that would be one of the major goals for the project, to prove that we can do that. So we're not constricted to just one type of protein source.
Excellent. So from a project manager point of view, the Innovate process is flexible enough to acknowledge that this is R&D and it's not a rigid plan. Is that a fair point for both Sandra and for Catherine, actually?
Well, from my point of view, it was written to be relatively flexible. We were very surprised that we couldn't get hold of the insects in Nigeria as easily as we thought we could. And we had looked at the literature and thought we could do it. Even since writing the talk, we've now come across other people who are farming some insects who are helping us greatly move forward. But yes, once we've actually got the project underway, I think it's, as long as we kept talking to people and telling people what we're doing, the flexibility has been enough for us to move the project forward from a commercial point of view.
So did you want to add anything about the flexibility that you can have in that process, Catherine?
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. I think, in terms of the flexibility, I think, we are flexible. You can't, completely change the scope of your project because your project will be assessed on your application. So if you want to do something completely different, then that would be a no. But I think we recognise that things don't always go to plan, or actually maybe something comes up which is actually a better way of doing something, and it does allow you to sort of be flexible in that way.
Brilliant. Thank you, Catherine. Got a quick question for you then. It's a sort of technical one. What percentage can an African small NGO claim?
So if you are sort of an NGO or a charity, then you can claim 100% of funds. But it's probably best popping a line into support by the email, because we realise that sometimes the status of organisations, whether it's UK or Africa, sometimes the definitions are slightly different. So yeah, you can always put a request in through support and we'll confirm that. But it's likely 100%.
Thank you. There's a question which I think you touched on a little bit, Sandra. It's around how much does the insect you're working with influence the type and end products you can produce, the impacts on flavour, texture, for example. And I'm just going to add another question to that, which was around the reaction of the local people to insect meal. and market trials? It may be a bit early stage in your project, but I don't know if you could say something about that for me.
Well, so far, the insects that we've tried, the flavour type profiles seem to be quite good. One of the big things I think I made, try to make it clear in the talk, that we are concerned that we get enough heat treatment in them to make them safe. So that's one of the big things. So we've actually asked, as part of the Innovate programme, very early on, we had a questionnaire out to school children and just asking them whether they would eat insects and what did they think about eating insects. And there was a good range of positive type responses. Some of it is that we do some wild catch now and it's considered a luxury item. And the other one was we wouldn't eat them, but we're interested in eating them. And I think it's generally recognised that the protein quality from insects is very, very high. And therefore, to supplement some of the other sources of protein, it has to be beneficial from that point of view. So as long as it tastes and looks good, you've got a chance of improving the general nutritional values.
Great, thank you very much for that. Back to you, Catherine. It's an application question. It's applications that include African universities as consortium partners viewed more favourable than those that include African NGOs and or SMEs.
Thanks, Simon. So the team that you put together as part of your consortium is one of the key parts of the application. So there is a whole question on the team, but projects with particular types of organisation aren't favoured. The question that you'll be asked is, who are the team involved in your project and what skills and expertise and capabilities do they bring to the project? And really, you just need to make sure that you have the right partners in your consortium to deliver a good project. So short answer is no. I've done a bit of a longer answer, but no, we don't favour particular types of consortia, but you need to make sure you explain who you've got in your application.
Thank you for that. And again, just sort of promoting the KTN in that respect. If you've got any doubts about your bid, etc., have a chat with us. We see what we can do. And if you are going to put an application in, we are able to critique that application for you and point out where we think with our knowledge and expertise and experience in these areas, you can improve that. So that's another way of working on that. Sandra, we have another question. It's not really about the process as such. I guess it's more of an observation. That somebody's asking, is plant protein not more beneficial than animal protein? I guess it's more of a personal view than something on that, but people are interested in that. If you've got a comment, please.
Well, interesting enough, the materials that we're making is a combination of both these. That's the way we intend to do it. So we're probably going to have a starchy base support, which is going to probably use some legumes within it. So we're likely to have some cowpea or pigeon pea in there as well, which is very difficult to process normally. So one of the things is they need heat treatment. A lot of those plant proteins, unless you extract them, have a lot of anti-nutritional factors in them. So again, you've got to make them safe. So that's the carrier, and that moves what we're trying to make into a high protein food. Make it super high protein. The insects are going to be on the top of that. But the great thing about the insect proteins is that their amino acid profile is normally much better than just using plant-based sources of protein. So, I hope it's a combination, because that's what we're trying to fix for people, is that they can actually use some of the local grown materials, but also grow some of the insects on a small scale and combine the both to make this product. That's what makes it special, I think.
Yeah, I can only agree with that from experience. We're well known even in this country that plant-based proteins are notoriously difficult for texture and flavour, and ultimately, I guess it is the balanced diet which we've always been told about. So thank you for that. Catherine, back to the technical questions. What level of overhead is allowed on staff costs?
So you normally have two options. You can either calculate your overheads yourself and actually put in specific lines for overheads, or I believe you can select a 20% standard rate, so 20% of your labour costs as an overhead. So it depends if you want to go through the process of calculating your exact overheads or just apply for that 20% standard.
Thank you. I've got another one for you. Are African academic groups eligible for funding?
Yes, so African academic partners are eligible for funding. So if you are an African university or research institute, you will be eligible for 100% of your grant costs.
Brilliant. I'm going to stick with you because another one's come in on that way. Following on from that, academics groups. So if so, what are the grant rates and what do they need to do to show they could be eligible for grant recipients? Oh, sorry, I've not done proper English there, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, so African universities and research institutes can apply as partners, and so you would apply for 100% of the grant rate. I'm not sure what the question's asking in terms of how do you show that you're eligible. I mean, you'd need to be eligible, as in you need to be from one of the eligible African African countries that I showed on sort of my previous slide. But yeah, you'd need to be a registered research organisation or university.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think that is quite key. That there is only certain countries within Africa that are eligible to that, and that list will be on the competition scope. I think we've got to the end of the questions that have come in. I'm just going to sort of fill in for a little bit, just in case anybody's got a last-minute question that they want to throw in. Of course, do remember that any questions that come afterwards, you can contact the KTN and we'll do our best to do it. If it's a scope question, obviously there's the support at innovate.ukr.org email address there that you can use. So thank you once again to Catherine and Sandra for taking the time to tell us about the competitions and share your experiences. Looks like the Q&As have gone. I'm now just going to move the webinar forward and tell you about how we can help you build those collaborations. So say this is the consortium building session, and what we are saying is we've already sent out to you the capability document in the Excel format. When we prepared the slides, we had over 350 people registered. That's increased by at least 100 people. So we have got a lot of information. What we will try and do is refresh that document with all the final registrations and send those out to you again. Say Excel spreadsheet, so you have a way to filter through that and find out the information that you want to do. And really, as we've always said, the meeting mojo is the way forward that we really want to do it. And I think part of that reflection is, as Sandra said, the face-to-face meeting with her project partners was really valuable. And we do know that obviously those relationships do make a project. So by using the meeting mojo, you have that way of demonstrating to people what you have, what you want. You have the messaging, but for me, the key is there is the opportunity to do a one-to-one video chat with people by booking that meeting. So hopefully you found that. Again, we've probably got 70 odd people, if not more, on that system already, and we're encouraging you to do more and more. And it'll be a great way for you to find a partner and hopefully build a thing. So it's on today till 6 o'clock with those 15-minute slots for videos. We are meeting again on the 20th of July. That may seem like a strange date that we're doing it, but that's actually the date that the competition goes live. So you have got a few weeks now to start thinking about things and come up with things, and we'll try and contact you again around that date to prompt you that there's the opportunity to go on there and meet some more people. During the whole time, you will be able to still use the message facility within Meeting Mojo, so you can start that dialogue, but the video bit will be on the 20th of July. And we may well open it up a week or so after that. We'll see how the uptake goes. The other one, again, we should touch on at the start, is the LinkedIn group. This is an approach that we did in earlier rounds, round 8 and 9. This is a way that you can go on and say you have a project and you're looking for somebody with some particular skills, and hopefully they will reach out and contact you through the messaging services on LinkedIn. As you say, there's probably 450 or more people on there, and if I move on to the next slide, you'll see Lucy's taking a screenshot of that thing, and you can see some things there. There's a few guidelines on there about how we're trying to use the pages, and as we say, there's 432 when that screenshot was taken. All the different ways that we're trying to help you find those partners to build it. So really, that's the summary. Hopefully, you found out the scope, the way to apply, the experiences that Sandra has shared with us. Hopefully, demonstrated to you that here at the KTN, we're trying our best to find ways of you to meet your people, come up with project partners, good ideas, and please do use the KTN. We're here as a service to try and help you make that bid as good as possible and give you as much chance of success. So thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye.